Hi, welcome to lesson 1.6, which is comparing and ordering decimals. Now we're going to be working out of your textbook. It's on page 35, so I recommend that you find page 35, get it ripped out, and do all your work right there on the page. Then you can go ahead and trim it and glue it so that it fits nice and neatly into your journal. That way everything's all in one place and you don't have to write down quite as much. We are also going to set up your page in the journal because we always want to know what it is that we're doing on these pages. So go ahead and open up your journal toward the front. The next page should be page M4. This is lesson 1.6 and of course today's date 9/8/20. Now before you write down any work today, I want you to copy the sentence into your journal. You can't compare unless it's fair. And we're going to work with that a lot today, with what making sure it's fair even looks like and how it's going to make sure that we compare our decimals accurately. So let's get started. I'm going to ask you to write down the work for all 8 questions today. It is not very much actual writing, so I think you'll be just fine with copying down the work for all of them. So we're going to start with number 3, and it says in the directions compare, and I see 8 and 537,000ths, and they're going to want us to write the symbol in the circle, and then the other one is 8 and 541,000ths. And what we're going to do is we're going to stack the digits, lining up the decimal, and then first we're going to make sure that they have the same number of digits in both numbers. So I'm going to take my decimal point, I'm going to copy this number over here right down below so that they're stacked. So I take my decimal and I line it up, and then I look and see what's to the left of that decimal, and it's only an 8. So I'm going to line up that 8 exactly with the other 8, and then a 5 comes next. Line it right up under that 5, and then a 4 comes next, line it right up under that 3, and a 1 comes next, line it right up under that 7. So this right here is an example of one where they gave it to us and it's already fair. We have the exact same amount of digits, and that means that we can fairly compare because we're going to be comparing each place value as its own thing. Just like when you compare whole numbers, you always start in the biggest place value when you compare decimals. In this case, that place value is the ones. I like to underline as I go so I can keep track of what place value I'm working with. So I'm going to look at the first digit here. It's an 8. It's an 8. 8 is equal to 8. We don't know anything. We've got to keep going. We don't compare the decimals, but it's a good idea just to double check, yes, our decimals are perfectly lined up. Next, we compare a 5 and a 5, and again, those are the same, so we keep going. Now we compare a 3 and a 4, and 4 is bigger than 3. So I like, when we're just comparing 2 numbers, I like to circle my bigger number, because these are in the same place value, and 400ths is bigger than 300ths. We don't even need to go on to the 7 and the 1, because just like 31 is bigger than 29, 41,000ths is bigger than 37,000ths. So I know that this number over here, 8 and 541,000ths is the bigger number. So our hungry little alligator always wants more. So 8 and 537,000ths is less than 8 and 541,000ths. Let's move on to number 4. So they again wrote the numbers sideways. We're going to stack them and work with what you got, right? So we start by lining up that decimal point. Next, what's in front of the decimal is a 6, so we're going to line that decimal exactly under the other 6. After the decimals are lined up, after the decimals of 4, we put it under that 4. Next is a 0, we put it under that next digit, which also happens to be a 0. Next we have a 9, we put it under that next digit, which happens to be a 1. Now we go place value by place value, starting with the biggest, which happens to be the ones place. So we look in our ones place, 6 is the same as 6. Doesn't help us, let's keep going. Decimals are indeed lined up, so we're good there. Next place value, our 4 and our 4. Again, it doesn't really help. Let's keep going and learn some more information. We keep going and we find a 0 and a 0. Still doesn't help us. We got to keep going. We find a 1 and a 9. Finally, something that's useful. Our 9 is indeed bigger than our 4. Our 9 is bigger than our 1. So this whole 6 and 409,000% is bigger than 6 and 401,000%. They're really close, but this one is indeed bigger. So again, we draw in our sign to say 6 and 401,000% is less than 6 and 409,000%. And again, our numbers were fair as we compared them because we had the same number of digits. Let's move on to number 6, Number 6 is going to be next. So we have 0 and 2500%. And 0 and 250,000%. So right away, I'm noticing that they are not the same number of digits. So what we're going to do is we're still going to stack our numbers, starting with that decimal point. We'll take this decimal point and put it right underneath that one. What's in front of our decimal point? It's a 0. We'll put it in front of the decimal here. Next, we have a 2. We'll put it right next to that decimal point. Next we have a 5. We'll put it right there. Next we have a 0. Oh no, there is nothing to put this 0 under. So here's how we're going to problem solve. We're going to put the 0 right next to the 5. You can't compare unless it's fair. Well, here we have an example where it's not fair. We have all of these digits lined up, but there's nothing up next to this top 5 to compare the bottom 0 to. So we're going to add a digit, and we're going to add a digit that's not going to change the value of that 0 and 2500ths. What digits don't change the value? Well, that would be a 0. So we're going to put in a 0, a nice little imaginary 0 after that 5. And now you can see that it is now fair. We have the same number of digits in our top number and our bottom number. And we just go, again, starting with the biggest place value, working our way down to the smallest. So, 0 and 0, that's a match. So we keep going. 2 and 2, that is another match. Let's keep going. 5 and 5 is another match. So let's keep going. 0 and 0. Yet another match. That means that these two numbers are equal. So we write the equal sign in. Next, we're going to take a look at number 7. So we have 2 and 701,000% and 2 and 7/10. So again, stack our digits, starting with the decimal point, line it up. We have a 2 in front of the decimal point. Let's write a 2 right in front of that decimal point. Notice how we lined it up. Next we have a 7. Again, right after the decimal point, line it up. And we don't have anything else over here, but we do have digits still over here. How do we solve that? You can't compare unless it's fair. Let's make it fair by making both numbers have the same amount of digits. So, an imaginary 0 goes here, and an imaginary 0 goes here. Now it's fair, so we can finally compare. So 2 lines up with 2, and they're the same, so we don't know anything, we keep going. 7 matches up with a 7, again it's the same, we keep going. 0 and 0, they're the same, let's keep going. 1 and 0 are not the same, 1 is bigger than 0. So this first number here, 2 and 701,000ths, is the bigger number, so it is greater than 2 and 7/10ths. Let's look at number 9 next. You can see that they laid it out a little bit differently. We have 0 and 41,000ths, and we're comparing that with 41 and 6/10ths. So the first thing that we're going to do is get this word form into standard form. So 41, I see the word and, I'm going to circle it. And remember that means a decimal point. Very good. So we know we have a decimal point, and we know that in front of that decimal point it's 41. Boop, boop. And then after the decimal point, I see 6/10ths. So think back to your place value. What's the very first one after that decimal called? That's right, it is indeed the 10ths. We don't need any more than the 10ths because this word right here tells us that we just have one digit after that decimal point. So we fill them in now. 41 comes in front of the decimal. 6/10ths comes after. Now we have to stack. So we're going to line up our decimals. And we have to write 41 right in front of that decimal. So I'm going to put a 4 and a 1 right there. Oh dear, I'm already seeing a problem. I see my 1 lines up with a 0, but nothing lines up with my 4. So I'm making a mental note to go back to that in a minute. And I'm going to put my 6 right after the decimal. And I don't have any more digits to write from here. So we're going to fill in our zeros wherever it's not fair, because you can't compare unless it is fair. So let's put an imaginary 0 up here. Again, a 0 in front of a digit will not change the value, and a 0 after a digit, again, will not change the value. Now we have a fair problem, so we can finally compare. So we start at the biggest place value, and we see a 0 and we see a 4. And right away we can see, well, 4 is definitely bigger than 0. So 41 and 6/10ths is the bigger number. Draw in our sign. So we have 41,000ths is less than 41 and 6/10. There we go. Moving on to number 10, we have 7,000ths, and then we have 7/10ths. And we're going to take this word form and put it into standard form. That way we're comparing two like sets of numbers, two like numbers in the same form. So I see this word thousandths, and it ends in that THS, which means that we have a decimal point in this number. Ooh, some thunder out there. And we need to figure out how many places do we need to draw. I don't see the word and anywhere, so I already know that there's a 0 in front of that decimal point. So this is the 10ths, the 100ths, the 1000ths. And it says that 7,000ths is our decimal, so I know that the 7 goes right there in the 1000ths place, and everything else is zeros. Now we can stack and actually properly compare. Because I already drew lines here, I'm going to write this decimal over on this side because this is clean and doesn't have any lines, and I don't want to get confused. So line up our decimals. We put a 0 out in front of that decimal. We put a 0 right after it. Another 0, and then finally our 7. And oh dear, this is not very fair. So let's fix that. We're going to put our imaginary 0 right after that 7 up top. And another imaginary 0 after that, because we still need a buddy for this 7 on the bottom. Now it is fair. We've made it so it's fair. You can't compare unless it's fair. It is fair. Let's go. So we start with our 0 and our 0. Those are the same. 7 and 0 are not the same. 7 is bigger. We don't need to worry about the rest of the digits because we stopped to make it fair. And so 7 is bigger. So 7/1000th is less than 7/10th.